Hello, I am Tanvir. I have been working in the software development industry for over 10 years. I have successfully completed many projects in my career. So here I am creating tutorial series for you based on my real experience. So, in this tutorial series I will cover development environment setup and configuration for Python Django on Windows, Mac and Linux. After that we'll show database and other configuration with the Django framework. Then I will cover the areas of user registration, login, logout, and user authentication. And also cover basic of Django admin panel. Then we'll cover CRUD operation. That means here we'll cover creating or inserting data, reading data, updating data, and deleting data. Data filtering and searching feature also cover in this tutorial. I will show you how to export data as a CSV file. Exporting PDF files will also be included. And finally, I will show you how to deploy the project to the server. So let's get started. Hello everybody. In this section, we will set up the project development environment for our project and use GitHub as the repository. So, let's first create a repository named after our project. Type a project name as the repository name. Here you can type a repository name of your choice. Now, I am adding the README file so that later I can write any project-related instructions in this file. And finally I will add the gitignore file where I will select Python because we all know that the main programming language of this project is Python. Then click on the Create Repository button to create the repository. Here you see that the README file has been created and the gitignore file has also been created. And here you see that almost all the ignore items related to Python are listed. If you want, you can add or remove any new ignore items here in this file. From the Code button, you will get a link to clone the repository which you need to copy. There are 3 options to clone the repository: HTTPS option, SSH option and GitHub CLI option. I will use SSH option because I have SSH configured on my PC. I am not showing the SSH configuration here because there are many videos on SSH configuration from which you can watch. We will mainly focus on project development. As I said earlier, we will mainly focus on project development, so we will not discuss the details of Git commands. We are using VS Code Editor, so we will manage version control using VS Code's Git plugin. Now click Clone Git Repository and paste the SSH link, then select the directory where you want to put the project. Now the project is being cloned from the Git repository and downloaded to your selected directory. At this time it may ask for your Git password, which you will have to provide. At this stage, the project is cloned and the code editor will prompt an alert about opening the project. Here I am opening the project in the editor by clicking on the Open button. Here you can see that the gitignore file that was created on GitHub is the same file. So we have completed the configuration of the Git repository of this project with our editor. It's pretty simple, right? Now we'll just focus on project development. So let's start the project development now. So the first thing we'll do is click on New Terminal from the Terminal menu to open a terminal window. I'm expanding the terminal window a little for ease of viewing. It is a good practice to develop Python projects in an isolated development environment. We can also use Docker for an isolated environment. Using Docker is a best practice for any project. I will soon share a tutorial series on complete professional project development using Docker, where you will see how a real-life project is developed nowadays. So to create a virtual environment, type Python -m -venv -env and hit the Enter button. Here I have given env as the name of the virtual environment. You can give any name you want. To know more about virtual environment, the link is given in the description box. Here you see a directory named env has been created. If you expand it you will see a subdirectory named scripts. Since I am developing the project on Windows OS, a subdirectory named scripts has been created. In case of Linux or Mac OS, it would have been created with the name bin, which I will show in the next section. Now we will activate the virtual environment, so type /env/scripts/active. Since this is Windows OS, / is being used. In case of Linux or Mac OS it would have been /. Our virtual environment has been activated. Notice that our virtual environment is shown at the beginning. Now we will install the Django framework by typing pip install Django, which will be installed in our virtual environment. Our Django installation is complete. Every framework has its own ecosystem, so we have to follow its ecosystem to develop a project with Django framework. So our first task is to create a project? So type django-admin start project CRM and hit enter. Here CRM is the name of our project. Now we see that a new directory named CRM has been created. This is our Django project where we see a file named manage.py, and this will act as the main driving force for our Django project. Now we will run our Django project. Now first we have to enter our project directory, so type cd/project name. In this case our project name is CRM. Now to run our Django project type Python manage.py run server. We see that our server is running on port 8000. Click the link. Great, our project has run successfully. All frameworks have their own ecosystem. So Django framework also has its own ecosystem. So far we have seen how to create a Django project and run the project on the server. Now we will see how to create an app in this Django project. Actually, this is also included in the ecosystem of Django framework. So to create an app type Python manage.py. Space type start app. Then type app name. In this case the name of our app is web app. Now hit the enter button to create the app. We see here that another directory called web app has been created. Actually I like this process because it is very helpful in developing a large-scale web application. Because in a large-scale application many modules have to be developed. So, if we create each module as a separate app, then both the development process and project management become very easy. Now we need to register this newly created app in our project. So, to do that, open the settings.py file inside the CRM project directory. Go to the installed apps section in the settings.py file, and add the name of the app. In this case, the name of our app is web app. So, type web app inside the inverted commas. And make sure to add a comma at the end. In this way, if we want to create more apps or modules in this project, then we will keep adding those apps or modules in this installed app section. Since Django is an ORM-based web framework, so it is capable of performing any database operation through its own engine. By default, Django is set to SQLite as the database. We will learn more about this as we develop the project. We are now running the command Python manage.py migrate. This will create Django's default tables in the database. As we have seen, the default tables are created. Django provides admin panel by default. So to access the Django admin panel we need a superuser. So let's create a superuser. Type Python manage.py create superuser, input username. In my case I am typing admin, then type email address. You can skip this if you want, but it is a good practice to provide the email address. Now enter the password for the superuser. Retype the same password again. Here an alert is shown. Don't be afraid. I have given a very simple password which is similar to username, that is why I am seeing this alert. Just type Y and hit enter. So now let's run the project by typing Python manage.py run server. Okay, our server and project have run successfully. So let's take a look at the admin panel and see what's inside the admin panel. Just type /admin at the end of the URL and you will see the admin panel login window. Type the username and password we provided for the superuser and click the login button to log into the admin panel. Click on the users menu to see the list of users. Here we can see the superuser we created. Now, all the work done so far needs to be pushed to our Git repository. I mentioned earlier that we will focus only on project development, so I am not talking about Git commands. Here I will mainly use the Git plugin of the VS Code editor. Honestly, why bother writing Git commands when VS Code editor has such a good feature for version control? Still, it is a personal preference. In fact, once I myself used to manage version control by writing Git commands in the terminal. So, to push to the repository, just write some message in the message box. And then click on the commit and push button. At this time, it may ask for your GitHub password which you will need to provide. Okay, done. Hopefully we have successfully pushed our project to the GitHub repository. Now let's go to GitHub and check if the project has actually been uploaded to the repository or not. Great. Our project has been successfully uploaded to the GitHub repository. Look at our CRM folder. And inside it, our project and web app folders are also present. Great. We were able to complete the initial project setup, Django admin panel configuration, and also configured the GitHub repository very easily. Anyway, we will do the same thing on Mac OS in the next section. Actually, configuring this project on Mac OS and Linux OS is the same. If you feel comfortable with Windows OS, then you can skip the next section. Hello everybody. Hope you are all well. We have set up and configured the development environment for our project on Windows OS in the previous tutorial. Now we will set up and configure the development environment for our project on Mac OS. Actually, the setup and configuration for both Mac and Linux OS are the same. Like the previous tutorial, we're starting with the GitHub repository setup. Here I am writing tut-crm mac as the repository name. Now we will add a gitignore file where we will select Python as the language. And finally we are adding a README file so that we can write any project-related instructions in this file. And then click the Create Repository button. So here is our repository created. Here I will copy the SSH link to clone the project. I am using the SSH link because SSH is configured on my PC. I will not show configuring SSH here because many videos related to this already exist. We will only focus on development. Now paste the copied SSH link to clone the project. And select a directory where our clone project will be stored. Here I am using the Git plugins of VS Code Editor. I am creating a new folder where we will store this project. You can create the directory as per your choice. Now, click on the Select as Repository Destination button, and the project will start cloning from GitHub. At this time, your GitHub may ask for a password for authentication, which you will need to provide. Now you will get an alert prompt to open the project in the editor. In my case, I'm just opening the project in the editor by clicking the Open button. Like my last tutorial, here too I will use the VS Code Editor's Git plugins to maintain version control. Now let's open a new terminal to create our Django project. I'm expanding the terminal a little so that it's easier to see the commands I'm going to type. It is a good practice to develop Python projects in an isolated environment. Here, I will create a development environment in a virtual environment. So, type Python 3-m-venv and then type name of the virtual environment. In my case, my virtual environment name is env. Okay, our virtual environment is ready. Here you see a folder named env has been created. Although using Docker is a best practice. Later, I will share with you a complete professional real-life project development tutorial using Docker. Now type source env /bin /acti, then hit enter. Notice here that our virtual environment has been activated according to the name of the virtual environment we created, which is shown inside a bracket at the very beginning. Now, we will install the Django framework into our virtual environment. So to install it, type pip install Django. Look, the Django installation has started. It will take a very short time to install. Okay, our Django installation is complete. We all know that every framework has its own ecosystem. So, Django also has its own ecosystem. Our first task is to create a Django project. To create a Django project, type Django-admin space start project, then type the name of the project. In this case, we are typing CRM as the name of our project. Our Django project is created. Here we see a folder named CRM created. Now to run our project we need to enter the directory CRM. So, type cd space CRM and hit enter. Now type python manage.py run server. Here the manage.py file acts as the main driving force. Great. Our project has successfully run on port 8000. Click on this link to verify the project and see if it actually run or not. Wow! Great. Our project runs successfully. So, we have already created the Django project. Now, we need to create an app for this project, which can be called an infrastructural process of the Django framework ecosystem. Actually, I like this process because in particular, the management and maintenance of a large-scale application project development has to be considered. This process plays a very helpful role in developing a large-scale application. I will share more details about this while working on this project. So, to create an app, type python space manage.py start app, then give the name of your app. In this case I am giving the name web app. Okay, our app is created. Look here, a folder named web app has been created inside the CRM directory. Now we need to register this web app in our project. So, to register we need to add it to the list of installed apps section in settings.py file. It is part of the Django framework ecosystem. While registering the app, be careful that the name of the app must be inside the invited comma and must end with a comma, as I show here. Honestly, I like this process a lot. Because in the case of large-scale application development, there are usually many modules that we can easily consider as apps and develop them, which makes project development management quite easy. It's a bit like microservice architecture, but the Django framework is not actually a microservice architecture. Since Django is an ORM web framework, it is capable of performing almost all database operations with its own engine. By default, it is configured with an SQLite database, which is defined in the database section of the settings.py file. I will also show you how to configure it with other databases later. But now we need to create the default database tables for Django. So, to do that, type python manage.py space migrate then hit enter. Great. The default Django tables have been created in the database. Django provides a default admin panel. So to access that admin panel we need to create a super admin user. So let's create a super admin user. Type python manage.py create super user. Now enter a username. In my case I typed admin. Now enter an email address, although you can skip this by pressing enter if you want. Enter password now. Enter the same password again. Don't be scared by this red text. Just type Y and hit enter. I entered the same username and password and made them smaller, that's why this warning is being shown. Now let's run the project by typing python manage.py run server. Okay, now we see the project is running on port 8000. So let's check the admin panel now. To check the admin panel, type /admin at the end of the URL and hit enter. Wow! Great! This is the login page to access our Django admin panel. So, let's enter the username and password of the superuser we created and then login. Wow! Great! We have successfully logged into the Django admin panel. And here we see the superuser we created. So far we have set up the development environment, created a Django project and created an app inside it, and finally we have configured the Django admin panel. Great! Now we need to push all the work we have done to GitHub to maintain version control, and we will definitely use the Git plugins of the VS Code editor. I repeat that we will focus only on project development in this tutorial. So I will not cover Git commands or any other additional topics here. So here we type the message which we know as the Git message. Now, select commit and push option to push to GitHub. And click yes for confirmation. At this stage, GitHub may ask for a password for authentication which you will need to provide. Great! Finally, we were able to successfully push to Git. So, now let's verify whether our work has been uploaded to GitHub or not. Let's select our repository first. Wow! Nice! Here we can see all our work, so it has been successfully uploaded to GitHub. And both the project folder and the app folder exist here, and each folder has its own files inside it. So, we have successfully completed the development environment setup, initial Django project setup and GitHub configuration as version control for our CRM project. In the next section, we will start our CRM web application development work. So hopefully we'll see you in the next section. As I said in the last tutorial, the Django framework is actually an ORM-based web framework. Here ORM stands for Object Relational Mapping. By default Django integrates with SQLite, but we will use the popular MySQL database in this project. So, to install, type pip install MySQL and hit enter. Okay, the MySQL driver is installed in our development environment. Now, we will install the MySQL connector. To install it, type pip install mysql connector python and hit enter. However, this connector will be installed without the -python option, because the official connector does not suggest the -python option. Still, I am installing with this option because for some unknown reason, it sometimes gives problems if it is not there. So, to avoid any inconvenience, we are going to install it as an official suggestion, so that, if there is a problem with one, the other can support it. So type pip install mysql connector and hit enter. Great. Our MySQL driver and MySQL connector installation has been successfully completed. Now, we need to download the MySQL database server. So, to download it from their official website according to your operating system. In my case, since I am using Windows OS, I am downloading the MSI installer. Let me share an important information with you. Usually, in most cases, PostgreSQL database is used with Django projects because it is quite robust among open-source RDMS database servers, which is very close to Oracle Database Server. Since Django is an OMR-based web framework, as I said before, it can handle any database server. There is no need to know any separate configuration or language. So whether it is RDMS or NoSQL database server, you can follow the normal process of Django for any of them. I will share with you a complete tutorial using Docker with Django, PostgreSQL, and React very soon. The tutorial will definitely be based on a real-life project, and the tutorial will be very useful for your professional work. Now, let's get back to our work. I am not showing installing MySQL server here because I believe we can all do it. Since we are using MySQL database server, we need to update the databases section in our settings.py file. Here we see that the SQLite configuration is already set, as it is the default setting for the Django framework. Let's check the db.sqlite file, because you must remember that we created a super admin user in the last tutorial. So, let's check that the super user is actually here or not. We should take a look at this because the default SQLite was configured until the last tutorial. And now we will shift to MySQL. Here we select the auth user table. Yes, look, our super user is here. Just remember the email address here, because in the next step we are going to connect to MySQL database, and that will clear up some confusion for us. Okay, now let's connect to the MySQL server. To do that, we need to update the databases section of our settings.py file. So, first let's define MySQL as our engine. Now let's input the database name. Although we haven't created this database on the MySQL server yet, just make sure that the database server is also running when you run this project. Now enter the database username. I am using the default username root here, but this username should not be used in production environment. And now enter the password. Here, I have kept the password the same as the username, but again I say that it should not be used in a production environment like this. Now, enter the host name. Since this is my local PC, I will enter localhost here. Here, remember, the key and the value must be placed inside the invited comma and must end with a comma. Finally, enter the port. Here the default port of MySQL server is 3306. Okay, now, since we have given the database name CRMDB in this configuration, we need to create a database on the MySQL server with this exact name. And there are many ways to do this, but I will use the database extension of the VS Code editor here. I don't really want to go outside the VS Code editor and use anything else. Actually, it's a matter of personal preference. Here, I have my MySQL server running, and I will create a new database by clicking on the plus button in the corner. Here, a SQL file opens where I will give the exact database name that I just defined in the settings.py file. Then I will press the execute button in this left corner to create the database. Yes, the database has been created. Here is our database. Look, there are no database tables here yet. Now let's create Django's default database tables. Like in the last tutorial, here too we will create Django's default tables in our MySQL database using the migrate command. So type python manage.py space migrate. Then hit enter. Yes, the table is being created in our database. Okay, our default database tables are created. Now let's check if the tables have been created in the database. Click on the refresh button in the corner to see the all default tables. Great. Here are all our default tables. Now let's check the auth user table to see if any users exist. Look, there are no users here. So, let's now create a super user like we did in the previous tutorial. Now type Python manage.py space create super user, then hit enter. Enter username. In my case it's admin. Now enter email address. Here I am keeping the email address a little different from the previous tutorial. Here I am writing the email address as adminmysql@email.com. Enter password. Retype same password again. Enter Y, then hit enter. And don't worry about those red colored lines. It shows because my username and password both are same and very short password. Now let's check the auth user. Great. Here is our newly created super user, where we see our new email address that we just gave. So, now let's run our CRM project and check from the Django admin panel whether this newly created super user is showing there or not. So go to the terminal and type the command to run the project, then hit enter. Okay, our project runs successfully on port 8000 as usual. Wow, great. Our project has been successfully launched. Now let's access the Django admin panel. Just type admin at the end of the URL, then hit enter and login. Nice. We were able to log in successfully. Now, let's click on the user's link and check our desired super user, so that we can make sure that we are connected to the MySQL database. Yes. Here is the email address of our newly created super user. So now we have practically seen that the Django framework can be configured with any database very easily. Hope you are enjoying my tutorial series. In the next tutorial we will start building our app. Thank you. See you in the next section. Welcome back to our Django tutorial series. Let's start building our web app. In this section we will look at developing the home page and HTML templates. Most of the time we will work in this web app folder. Before we get to the main task, we need to do some configuration work which will help us organize our entire work. So, let's open the urls.py file located inside the CRM folder and delete the comments above as we don't really need them. Now, something needs to be updated in this file. First, let's add the include library after the path library from our django.urls package. Then we need to declare another path like the admin path which will represent our home page. So, to do that, write path, then add quotation marks which will be empty, so that Django considers it as the default URL path. Then after the comma, write include and inside it give the name of our app web app, then add .urls. As a result, Django will address the URL of our web app as the default app URL where our home page will be. And we need to create a urls.py file inside this web app folder. Now write .urls after web app to complete this statement. And of course, remember to end the statement with a comma. Now, we copy this code which will be useful when creating a new urls.py inside the web app folder. So, let's create urls.py. Let's paste the code we copied here. Now, let's delete the first line because we don't need it here. Also remove the include option. And delete the last statement too. We also remove the admin string inside the quotation and leave it blank. We will also replace this admin site.urls with our home page view. So, first we will remove it, then we will define our home page view controller here. So, type view. Oh, sorry. But before that, we need to import view package. To import the views package, type from, then put dot, then type import, and finally write views. Now, pass views in the path statement and write the home function with a dot. Then give the name of this path. To do that, type name equals home. Although function named with home has not been declared yet in the views.py file, that we need to declare it. Let's open the views.py file. Now what we need to do is define a function called home. So, let's define a function called home and pass the parameter named request. Then we need to give the return statement of this home function. So, to give that, write return render and pass the request as the parameter. And we need to give our home page as a string value. So write home.html. Although we haven't introduced the home.html page yet. Finally, I'll give an empty parameter. We'll talk more about this later. Save the file and move on to the next step where we will work on the home page. Now, let's create a folder called templates. Don't get confused about this template folder. Django already knows about this template folder, which we can see in the settings.py file. Now, inside this template folder we create our home.html file and open the file. Before we start working on the home page, let's take a look at the settings file to clear up any confusion about the template folder. Look, there's a section in the settings file called template, which actually handles this whole thing. Now, let's focus on the home page. First, we should check our home page to see if everything we did is working properly or not. So to do that, type h1 tag. And inside it write anything you like. In my case I am writing hello Tanvir. Let's run the project now. Before running, we need to activate the virtual environment. So activate it. Okay, our virtual environment is active now. Now move to our CRM project folder, type cd CRM and hit enter. Now, to run the project type python manage.py run server and hit enter. I hope everything is fine. Yes, the project has successfully run. Let's click on the URL and check our desired output. Great. Our initial goal has been met. Now, we will work on the basic design and layout. So to do this, we will first create an HTML file inside the template folder and name it base.html. At this stage we will use Bootstrap for design. Go to their official website and click on the docs link. We will be using this code base. So, let's copy it and paste it into the base.html file. We will remove the h1 tag and the hello world text inside in it and use Django's HTML tag here. So, to do that, type curly brackets then type percentages and inside it write block content. We need to remember that this block content must be closed. So, to close it, type end block between curly brackets and percentages. Let's change the title to Demo CRM Solution. Now, save the base.html file and integrate this base.html file into the home page. Now our goal is to print the text of this h1 tag of the home page inside the block content tag of the base.html file, right? So to do that, let's go to the home page and add Django tag to extend the base.html file. So inside the Django tag, type extends, then inside the quotations, type base.html. Then use the Django tag as usual by writing block content and close the block content at the end of the h1 tag by writing end block. So here we extended the base.html template page so that all the components of the base template are now represented on the home page. And finally we brought our h1 tag inside the Django block content tag so that the text, Hello Tanvir, is represented inside the block content of the base template. Pay attention to the font and style of this text. The text style and font will change after we refresh this page. Great! We were able to integrate Bootstrap and basic templates. Now, let's try to make our basic template a little more beautiful. Okay, go to the base.html page and add a div tag inside the body and write class equals container inside it. After the end block tag, close the div tag. Now, let's take a look at how it looks now. Refresh the browser and notice the change. It looks a little better now. Let's do a little better. Just add a break tag inside the div tag. Let's check again. Look, the text has now moved down a bit. It's in pretty good shape now, right? Now, let's try to give it a professional look. For that, we will again take the help of Bootstrap and look for the navbar component. But before that, let's create an HTML file and name it navbar.html and open it. Now find the navbar component. Here you will find many types of navbar components. You can use any navbar you like. But I want to use this code base. So, let's copy it and paste it into the navbar.html file. Now, let's go to the base.html file and add Django tag to include navbar. Put the Django tag inside the body tag and type include space, then type navbar.html inside the quotes. Let's check again. How does it look now? Refresh the web browser and see what the output looks like. Yes, it doesn't look bad. There's a search field, the navigation menu looks good, but it would be better if the look was a little darker. Right? So, let's see how it looks when it's dark. Go to navbar.html page. And first change the brand title in navbar to CRM. You can give it any name you want. Then replace the bg-body tertiary class with navbar-dark and bg-dar. Let's take a look again and see how it looks. Refresh the browser again and check for updates. Wow! Looks pretty good now. Looks professional. Right? For simplicity, for now we want to remove some items from the navbar items. For example, the home menu item. So let's remove the home menu item. Delete the drop-down menu option as well. Now, let's remove the search box too. Actually, we don't need it right now. Also remove the disabled menu item, because it is also not useful at this time. Let's take a look at our final layout now. Just refresh your browser. Yes, it looks pretty clean and simple now. Nice. We have finished our work in this section. We will learn on more interesting and business logic in our next tutorial section. Hope you enjoyed your tutorial. Stay connected with me and keep getting real-life project tutorials on machine learning, AI, data engineering, and also get career advice. Thank you. Hope to see you in the next tutorial. Welcome back everyone. Today we will be working on login. So let's get started. We will now start from the view.py file. So, for user authentication we will use the Django authentication library. So to use the authentication library, first we need to import the library, so type from django.contib.auth. Then we need to add authenticate class. So, type import authenticate. Then, we need the login class. This is the default login class of the Django framework. We will also import the logout class in the same way. Now we need to do something to handle the messages. Because after logging in, we want the user to see a success message, or even if the login credentials are incorrect, we need to show a message. Right? So for that we will import another library. So type from django.contib. Then, type import messages. This messages class will actually handle all kinds of success messages or alert messages. Let's run the project a little and share some important things. I think you're probably already having some confusion or questions. So let's run the project first. To do that we already know how to run the project. If you don't remember, type Python manage.py then type run server. Once the project is running, let's first go into the admin panel. Then log into the admin panel. Here we have already created a super user. So now we will not work with the user registration feature. So, we will develop the login logout feature using this super user. We will see user registration later. And the important thing I want to share with you that is, if you want, you can use a custom user table as per your requirement, where you can manage users' data as per your need. For that, you need to update something in the settings.py file, which I will show you in one of the next tutorial sections or at the end of the tutorial series. So we already know that in Django project development, to add a new page, we have to work in the views.py and urls.py files. So let's first create functions for login and logout. Type diff login view then pass the request parameter. And in the same way, we also create the logout view function. And then just type pass. Here we will implement the logic later. If we had defined this function as login or logout, those would have conflicted with the Django login logout package that we are already importing above. But if we had used a custom method instead of the login class of Django.contribution package, then there would have been no problem in creating a function called login. Here you see I am passing the request parameter. You will see its use a lot throughout the Django project. In simple terms, it is actually used as a request handler which is sent from the frontend. This views.py file is actually used as a controller for that request. Now let's define two paths for these two functions in the urls.py file. So let's copy it and then paste it twice. I will define one of these as the path for login and the last one for logout. So first type login / inside the quotes, then write views.loginView, which we have just defined as a function in the views.py file. And finally we need to give it a name, so name equals login. Now we do the same for logout. The only difference is that we have to write it as logout because we have created a function for it in the views.py file. Now let's go to the views.py file where we will work with our login form. Although we have defined this login view function, we will mainly use it if we create a separate login page. For now, we will keep the login form on the home page. For now, we will block and deactivate this code base of this login view function. We will work on login authentication in the home function. So now let's go to the home.html page and start working on the login form here. So, define a div tag inside the block content tag and write class equals call md5 followed by offset md5. Then, close the div tag just before the end block tag. Let's check if everything is okay or not. So let's refresh the web browser. Oh, sorry. We made a small mistake. Let's fix it. Let's go to the urls.py file. Look, here we have defined a path for login, but it is not needed for now because we manage login form on the home page. So let's keep the two URLs login and logout inactive. Let me check again now. Nice, now it's fine. You can see that the text is almost centered. Let's go to the home page to design the login form. Change the text inside the h tag to login. Now write the form tag and use post as the method. Because we will have to send the data we input from the frontend to the backend. In this case, by data we mean our username and password. Because with this data we will check the user's authentication. And define the type action equals URL and home inside the quotation marks. Because we will manage your login form from home. One thing we need to remember is that if we want to ensure the security of any form in a Django application, we must use Django's CSRF token tag. Because it will help protect the Django application from various types of unethical activities such as hacking. Now, let's design the login form. In this case, we will again take the help of Bootstrap. So, let's take a look at the Bootstrap documentation. Then, go to the Quick Start menu in the Forms section. In this case, I'll use this code base. So let's copy this code base. Now, let's paste the code we copied after the CSRF token tag. Let's check if our form is working. Perfect. It's working fine. Now let's update the form as per our needs. We'll keep this form as simple as possible. So, first let's remove the Check Me Out option, we don't really need it right now. Remove the label option. Now, change the input type to text. We don't need the ID properties. Let's replace them with name equals username. This div is not needed. Let's remove it. Now we don't need this label for our password field either. So let's remove it. At this time, we don't need an ID for the password field like the username field. So delete it. And add the name property. So type name equals password. It is better to add a placeholder to the username field. So type placeholder equals username. And similarly we do the same for the password field. So type placeholder equals password. Let's refresh the browser and check how it's going so far. Our login form is complete. Nice. Notice that the username field exists as a text field and the password field exists as a password type. I think it would look better if this submit button was moved down a little. So let's add the BR tag and move the submit button down a little. Let's refresh the browser and check again. Yes, it seems to be right. Actually, we can continue with the design even if we don't give it much time. Just add required property for both username and password fields. Actually, username and password fields should be required. Because users should know which fields the user has not entered. Refresh the browser and check if the fields are working properly or not. Let's leave the fields blank and click the Submit button. Look, I see an alert. Now just leave the password field blank and click the Submit button again. Yes, here alert has been shown as per our need. So our login form design is complete. Now our next target is to check whether the user is logged in or not. So, to check this, let's define a Django tag after the div tag and inside it write if space user dot is underline authenticated. So if the user is logged in, then we will show some text. In this case I want to show welcome Tanvir. So, I am writing welcome Tanvir inside the h1 tag. Now we need an else statement. So to do that, type else inside the Django tag. Now the summary is like this. If the user is already logged in, then the home page will show welcome Tanvir. And if not, which means else, then the login form will be shown. And most important part is, you have to remember to close the if statement. This is a very common mistake. I often make this mistake. After the vid close tag, write end if inside the Django tag. It is basically the closing of this if tag. Let's check our login authentication. You must remember that we created a super admin user. So we will check the login feature with that user. We have written the if statement on the home page where we have defined the logic that if the user is logged in then the text welcome Tanvir will be shown on the home page. And if the user is not logged in then the login form will be shown. Here we see the login form showing, which means we can assume that our initial logic is working. So now let's check our Django admin panel, and hopefully the login Django admin login page will be showing there too. Yes. We are seeing the login form here too. Great. Let's log in now and then go to our home page and check if the welcome Tanvir text is showing or not. Wow. We are showing welcome Tanvir text on our home page. Great. Our initial login logic implementation has been successful. Now if we want to access the admin panel, we will see that we have entered the admin panel, because Django knows that we are already logged in. And we will log out from the admin panel and then go back to the home page and check whether our login form is showing on the home page or not. Wow, look, the login form is now showing on the home page. Because according to logic, the login form is supposed to be shown on the home page. Right? Now we will implement the login feature on the home page. So to do that let's go to the view.py file and implement some logic in the home function. First things first, so we will first check if the user is already logged in or not. To do that we need a if statement, type if request.method equals post. Now, assign the username value from the login form to the username variable. Now, like the username variable, we will also declare a variable for the password. If you look here, you will see that the value of username in this post array is actually referring to the username that we defined in the name property in our login form. The same thing has been done for passwords. Now we will declare an object named user to authenticate the user. If you notice here, I have already imported the Django authenticate class above. Now, we will pass the username and password with the request parameters in this user object. I believe you must have understood here where I got the username and password values from. It's very easy to understand. Right? Now I will add an if statement here where I will log in the user using the Django login class and show a success message saying you are now logged in. Then I will redirect to the home page. So to do that, I am checking the user data from the user object, and if the user is not already set, then send a request to the Django login class with this user data and set this user data. Note that here I have imported the Django login class earlier above. Now we will give a success message if the user is successfully logged in. After successful login, we will redirect the user to the home page. So to redirect we need to import the redirect class, so let's import the redirect class by adding a comma after render on the very top line. Now in the return statement, write return redirect and then inside the brackets, give our home page inside the quotation marks. Now we need an else statement, because if the login is not successful, we have to keep the user in the login form again. And the user should also see an alert message. Right? So, I added an alert message with a text saying invalid username and password. Then redirect to the home page. So far we have checked the login through the username and password of the user and also checked whether the user is already logged in, which was included in the if statement. Now we also need an else statement. If the user is not logged in then we have to see the login form on this home page. Right? So to do this, just write the else statement, then press tab to move the return render line a little. That's it. Now let's check, refresh the browser and see. Let's give it a wrong username and see if it shows our alert message or not. Oops, there's a message to show here. There was supposed to be an alert message here, right? Why didn't you show this? Let's investigate this issue. Let's go to the base.html page. Here we use a Django tag inside the div container and first check if there are any messages with an if statement. Don't forget to close the if statement. This is actually a common problem for me. I don't know if this happens to you. So anyway, if we want to show an alert message, we need to show the message using a for loop statement. Again, to close the for loop statement, type n for and close it. And inside this for loop, pass the message through the Django tag. Now let's check if we are getting alert messages or not. It should work now. Hopefully it works perfectly. Let's see. Just refresh the browser first. Great, look, the alert message is showing. Let's try using this login form and see if we can log in or not. Great. We are logged in now. Look, our message is showing. The admin panel should also be in the logged in state. Yes, this is also working perfectly. Let's log out now from here and go to the home page to see what is showing now. Wow, nice. Look, now the login form is showing on our home page according to our logic. Great. So let's check random now. First, let's check with a wrong username and click Submit button. See the alert message that appears. Okay. Perfect. Now let's try to give our alert message a little more of a professional look. Again, we'll use Bootstrap to help us with this. From the Bootstrap doc link, click on the alert menu inside the component. I want to use this component. So let's copy this code base. And let's replace this message tag and paste it here. Let's delete this entire line that says holy guacamole and replace it with the message tag. Now let's look at our output. First refresh the browser and then try logging in with a wrong username. Look at the alert message. It looks pretty good now, right? Now let's try with the correct username and password. Great. See, the login success message is also showing. We have successfully accomplished our goal. In our next tutorial, we will work on the logout functionality. Stay connected with me and get real-life tutorial projects on machine learning, AI, data analysis, and data engineering. See you in the next tutorial. Welcome back, everyone. In this section we will log out the user. This is actually a very simple task. So, first we need to go to the urls.py file and define our required URL path. Although we had disabled the logout URL path in the previous tutorial section. In the last tutorial section, we disabled this login URL path because we did the login on the home page. If you want to manage the login on a separate page, you need to enable it. But now we will enable the logout URL path and disable the login URL path. Now, let's implement some logic in the logout view function in the views.py file. Now, let's remove the past text and implement the logic we need here. So, type logout here and pass the request parameter. Actually, we had already imported this logout class in the last tutorial section. Hopefully we remember that. So, now let's show a message. I'm showing this message because I want to give the user a confirmation that they have successfully logged out. Then I will redirect the user to the home page, where the user will see the login form again. So, our logout in the views.py file is done. It's pretty simple, right? Now, we need to go to the navbar.html page because here we need to integrate the logout feature. Now, here we need to provide some logic. For example, if the user is already logged in, then the user needs to be shown the logout link to log out. So, to do that, we will first use the Django tag, and inside it we will have to check if any user is already logged in or not. So type if user.is authenticated. So, this statement will check if any user is already logged in or not. Now, replace the link text and type logout here. We also need an else statement now because if there is no user already logged in, then we need to show the login form that we managed on the home page. Right? So, type else in Django tag. Now we need to close the if statement, otherwise I'll forget again. So, type end if. Actually, this Django tag is a bit of a hassle to write. I don't know how you feel about it. However, Now let's show the login link in the else statement. Because as I said earlier, this else statement basically shows the login link when the user is not logged in. So, let's copy this logout code. And now, paste this copied code after the else statement. And write login instead of logout text. Okay. Now what we need to do is add URL action references for both logout and login. To do that, in the href tag property for logout, type URL space then type logout inside quotation marks. If we go to the urls.py file, we will see that the name property for the logout path is defined as logout. So, we are passing the same value here as we defined in the name property for logout in the urls.py file. Now we will provide the home URL for login in the same way. Okay, the login and logout logic implementation is complete as per our plan. Now, it's time to test. So, let's first activate our virtual environment. I hope we all know how to activate a virtual environment now. Okay, our virtual environment is active. Now we need to run the server. And to do that, go inside our project folder and type python manage.py then type run server and hit enter. Okay, our development server has run successfully. Let's run the project in the browser. Yes, the project has run successfully and the user is already logged in. So let's log out. Look, the logout confirmation message is shown here. Now let's try to log in. First we will try with the wrong username. See invalid username or password message showing. Now let's try to log in by leaving both the username and password fields blank. Here I see a warning message showing for the username field. Now try to log in by filling in the username field and leaving the password field blank. Here too, a warning message is being shown for the password. Now let's try to log in with the actual username and password. Wow! Great! We were able to log in successfully and we can see a confirmation message and logout link visible as well. Let's click on the logout link. Yes, the logout worked successfully. See here too we see the login link and logout confirmation message. So finally we have successfully completed the login and logout functionality. So what we have done so far is, we have set up the project on both Windows and Mac OS platforms, then we have set up and configured the database, then we have set up the repository on GitHub in the easiest way for our project and implemented the login and logout functionality in this tutorial. In the next tutorial we will do the user registration. This user registration task will be a little complex but I will try to show it as simply as possible. So, stay connected with me. And if you want to get real-life project tutorials on machine learning, AI, deep learning, data engineering and data analysis, then stay with me. If you have any suggestions or opinions, please let me know, or you can let me know what other topics you would like to get tutorials on. I will try my best to make the tutorials very easy and simple, and definitely all tutorials will be based on real-life project. So, hope to see you in the next tutorial. Welcome back everyone. In this section we will register the new user. It's a little bit complex but don't worry, I will try to make it as simple as possible. So let's get started. We covered user login and logout in the last section. Before starting today's tutorial, let's first take a look at the admin panel. Let me tell you, if someone wants to manage user registration from the admin panel, then you can easily manage your users from here. Because you see that it is possible to register users from this panel as well. Since we completed the login authentication in the last tutorial, we can secure the restricted pages of the web page with that authentication. However, in this tutorial, we will also register users from the website. So let's go back to the code editor and first add a new URL for our registration page to the urls.py file. I'm just copying the previous URL for convenience. Paste this in the next line and change the name and path name to register. In the view class, we need to write a function for registration, so write the name of that function here. We will go to the view file and create a function with the same name. Write name equals register here. So now let's go to our view class and create a function for registration. For the convenience of a task, let's copy this return render statement and paste it here. Now let's type register.html here. Now let's copy this register.html text. Because we need to create an HTML file with the exact same name in the template folder. So, as I said, let's create a file called register.html inside the template folder. Now let's copy the extends tag and block content tag from the home page and bring it to our register page. And don't forget to close the block with the end block tag. This is actually a common mistake of mine, I don't know if it happens to you. Now write register inside the h1 tag and just check if the page is working or not. Now we need to add a menu item, so let's go to the navbar page and see where we can add our new menu item. Here you see we implemented some logic for the menu item in the last tutorial. The logic is that if the user is already logged in, then the logout will be shown, and if not, then the login link will be shown. So in this case, since we should not show the register link for the users who are already logged in, so we should keep this register link inside the else statement. So let's copy this login HTML block and then paste it here. Now change the login text to register. Now let's write register inside this URL tag. We have already defined this register URL in our urls.py file. Hopefully we all remember it. So now let's check whether the work we've done so far is working properly or not. Let's log out of the admin panel and go to our website to see if we have a register link and its page. Look here, since I didn't log out, only the logout link is showing. But when I log out, now look, both register and login are showing. Great. Our initial work is complete. Now let's develop the registration form. So let's go back to the code editor. Inside our web app folder, create a file called forms.py where we will develop our registration form. We first need to import the user creation form library. So to do that, type from Django contribution auth forms, then import user creation form. Then we need to import the user model. So type from Django contribution auth models import user. Now let's define a class called registration form and pass the user creation form as a parameter. Now let's define the fields we want to put in the form. We need the email field in this form. Then add the first name, and be sure to define the field type for each field. Now we will define the last name in the same way. Oops, I forgot to import Django forms. Let's import the Django forms package library. To do that, type from Django then import forms. Now let's add some field properties for these fields. Give the email field a label, but we'll leave it blank because we'll be using a placeholder to label this field. Now add the widget property and where we will define some attributes for this field. Here we are using this same property and widget attribute for both the first name and last name fields. I forgot to add another attribute to the widget, which is the class attribute. This is required because we are using Bootstrap. So copy this form control class attribute and paste it in both the first name and last name fields. Now let's create a class called meta. You can say this is a rule in the Django framework where we will define which fields from a model class we want to show in our form. So write model equals user. Then define which fields you want to put in our form. If you had written fields equals __ all here, all the fields of the user model would have been included, but for our simplicity, we will define the fields. If you notice here, you will see that I am using two fields, password1 and password2. This is actually when the user enters the first password during registration, and then when they enter the second password, it will be checked whether it matches the first password. This is actually a common practice. I will copy and paste some code from my GitHub repository at this stage. This is actually a very simple code. You can also say that it is just a rule for the Django framework. All of this is actually similar to the fields that we defined inside the registration form class. I will share my Git repository link in the description box, so that you can use this code. If you look closely, you will see that the attribute properties here are almost the same. The username, password1 and password2 fields are similar to the definition of the email, fast name and last name fields, and their attributes are similar. Now let's do some work in the view file, where we will save our registration data and implement some logic. If we look at the login form implementation logic, here we have used the post method. So we will use the same post method to save the registration data. Now we will declare an object called form under this if statement and call our registration form class instance here, where the request parameter will be post, because we will save the registration data in the database. I will explain the post, get, put methods in detail later. Note that I have already imported the registration class at the top of this view file. Oh, I made a small typing mistake. It should be form, not from. Okay. Since I have declared an object of the registration form class, its name should be form. First we will validate the form and then save the data. So we used an if statement because if the form is not validated we should show some alert. Now our goal is to automatically authenticate and log in the user after the user registration is successful. If you want, you can add some other logic here. For example, after the registration is complete, you can send an OTP to the user via email or mobile as 2FA authentication. But for simplicity's sake, I will describe this complex part later. Now declare a variable called username which will basically get the username value from our registration form. And similarly we will do the same for the password. Notice here I am getting password 1. You probably remember that we originally used password 2 to check if it is the same as password 1. But we will get password 1 here to save it. Now we are declaring an object named user and passing in two values, username and password, for authentication. I believe you already understand where the username and password values come from and how they are assigned. You must remember that we imported the Django login class at the top of this view file. Now we will use that to log in this new user, where we pass the user object as a request parameter. And now we should show a message to the newly registered user. Right? So let's give a message. In this case the message could be something like this: you are successfully registered and welcome to our site. Then redirect the user to the home page. So far we have worked with if statements, now we need else statements too, right? So what should be our first task? How should we handle our registration form if we want to register a user without providing any data in the form? So let's first declare an object called form for the registration form which will not have any request parameters. Now in the return render statement, declare an attribute called form. Here the attribute form actually refers to our form object. Now let's do some work on my register.html page. You see here I have taken the form tag and defined it as post method and left the action property blank. And to secure the form I have used CSRF token tag. I have already discussed this CSRF token tag in the last tutorial. Now we are using an if state for error handling in this form. Close the if statement, I might forget about it again. Inside this if statement, we use a div tag so that if an error is thrown, it is shown inside this div. Now we will take a for loop statement and where we will check the fields of our registration form for errors. Now we will take an if statement so that if we get an error in any field, we will be able to address that error. Now use the Django tag here to show the label tag of the field and the field error inside it. Now close the if statement. Don't forget to close the for loop statement. Notice on line 25 that I have put the form dot as underscore p inside the Django tag. This is a powerful and flexible technique in Django to render forms. In short, we created our registration form in the form.py file, which will be rendered in HTML format here. And on line 28, we have added a submit button that Django can automatically understand and will send a request to the view.py file to submit the data from the form. Okay. We finished our work, now it's time to check. Wow, our registration form is showing. Great. Actually, developing forms in the Django framework is quite easy. Now let's fill out the form and see if our logic implementation is working properly or not. Look at the alert showing above. Since we have used Django's user package library, this alert is showing. Let's make the password a little more complex and enter it. Wow! Great! We were able to register successfully. And notice here, as soon as the registration is completed, our implemented message is shown and at the same time it logs us into the system as our logic implementation did. Now let's go back to the admin panel and see if our new user has actually registered or not. I will log into the admin panel with the admin user because the users created from the registration form will not be able to access the admin panel because I am not registering them as staff. Yes, our new user is showing in the user list here. Notice here that our newly registered user's staff status is showing a red cross icon as I described to you a while ago. Now let's log out of the admin panel and check if we can log into our website with the newly registered user. Enter the newly created username and password and then hit the submit button to log in. Great. We were able to log in and we are seeing the success message. Now let's log out of the account and try to log into the admin panel with the same user. You will see that the login will not work. You see, you can't log into the admin panel because this user is not registered as a staff member. Now log in with the admin user. You see, now you are logged in. So, we have completed everything from project setup to user login authentication and user registration. We will go deeper in our next tutorial, where we will work on operational activities. I hope you are enjoying this tutorial series. Let me remind you again, if you want to get tutorial series on machine learning, AI, deep learning, and data science and data engineering, then stay connected with me. I hope to see you in the next tutorial. Welcome back everyone. In this tutorial we will be working with the model class. I told you from the first tutorial that Django is actually an ORM-based web framework. So this model class actually handles database operations. We don't have to handle different SQL queries for different types of databases here. So be it MySQL or Oracle or PostgreSQL database or any NoSQL database, whatever it is, Django engine is capable of handling these types of database operations. So let's now see practically how Django handles database operations. So, let's first open the models.py file. First, let's define a class named client and pass models model inside the parentheses. Here, I actually want to create a table named client. Now I will define some fields for this class, which will actually be defined as column fields for our database table, where the table name will be client. So the first property will be full name, which is a character field. So type models.charField. And I will define the maximum length of this field as 100 characters. So max_length equals 100. Then define another field called email, and in particular we will use email field as the field type, because it will automatically validate the email format when the user enters the email. In this case, I will give the maximum length of 50 in this email field. If you want, you can give a larger value in the max length. I think it shouldn't be defined for email field with length of only 50 characters. Let's make it maximum length of 100. Now, let's define another column called phone and define it as a character field as well. You can also define it as a number field. And in this case I will give the max length 15. I think that's enough. Now let's define another field called address in the same way. Let's define this as charField as well, and in this case set the max length to 250. You can give a larger value if you want. Now let's define a field called city and keep the field properties the same as the field above. Just like the city field, we also define the state field. Finally, we define the zip field and also define it as a char field because there are many countries in the world that maintain zip codes using a combination of numbers and letters. For example, cities in Canada. Now let's define the string method. Here we want to show the data of full name and email. If you want to show the data of any other column, then you have to give the name of that column here. So inside the parentheses of the return statement, type F, then inside the double quotation marks, type self.fullname with curly brackets. And similarly for the email field, type self.email with curly brackets. So we have completed the work of our model class for now. After defining a new model class and its fields, we must run the make migrates command to create the database table and its columns. So, let's run the command. Before running the command, let's take a look at the admin panel. There are some things I need to share with you that will help us understand better. To run the server, type python manage.py run server. Okay, so our project is running. Let's take a look at the admin panel. Here I see that there are only two options here, groups and users. After migration, we should expect a new option client here, right? Let's check our database now. You won't see any table called clients there either. This is our database, let's expand it. Look, I don't see a table called clients here yet, right? You can refresh and see if there's anything called clients here. You see, there's no table called clients here. Now let's shut down the server. Now for migrations, type python manage.py make migrations. Note that it will be make migrations, not migration. That means there will be an S at the end. Hopefully you have already caught this. Okay, our migration has been completed successfully. Here you can see that a py file has been created. This py file is located in the migrations folder in the web app folder. If you open this file, you will see that the fields are defined here in the same way as the columns of a database table are defined, where a primary key ID has been created with the fields we have defined. Well, I think we're missing something. We should define a date field. Right? Let's define a date field. Let's define a date field called created@. We will choose datetime field as its field type. Now, we will set auto_now_add equals true in the properties of this field so that this field can automatically store the time when we save our data record to the database. Now we need to run the migration again because a new field has been added to our client model. So let's run the migration command like last time. Don't be afraid to see this message. It's actually nothing, since I added the auto_now_add property to the created@ field, which actually sets the current date time as the default value. It's giving a warning message. Just press 1 to continue. Look, another new py file has been created in the migration folder. In fact, every time you run the migration command, a new file will be created like this. Notice here that we see the name of our newly defined field here. Now we have one last task left. We need to push the whole thing to the database, so type python manage.py migrate then hit enter. We have successfully migrated the database. So, what we once did is like this. We have created the model class and defined its fields and run the make migrations command. Now we need to push this whole thing to the database. In simple terms, now we need to create the table and its fields for this client in our database. Here I see a new table named webapp_client has been created in the database server. Let's take a look at this table. Here, see how this table is created with the fields we defined. So this is how any other database server works with the Django ORM framework. So the table has been created in the database. Now our next target is to make it operational in the admin panel. So to do that, let's go to the admin.py file. So before we start working on the admin.py file, let's visit the admin panel again. Oops! The server is off. It needs to be run first. Okay, now our server is up and running. Now let's take a look again. You see here that we don't see anything here except those groups and users options. Now let's go back to the admin.py file. Let's arrange to bring our client option to the admin panel. This is a pretty simple task, just type admin site.register and then pass our model class inside the parentheses. Here we need to import the model class. That means we need to import the client model class. It's like registering our client model class to access it from the admin panel. Okay. Now let's check the admin panel again to see if our client option is there or not. Just refresh your web browser and see. Great, here we see our client option, although it has an S added to it. This is actually how the Django engine creates it. So we can also store new records in the database from this admin panel. Let's store some data. Now hit the Save button. Great, our data has been saved. Now let's check our database. Let's see if the data is saved there properly. Look, our newly created data has been successfully saved in the database. Here you see that our created@ field has also automatically taken the date and time value of the data being saved. Now let's show the created@ field in the client list. To do that, we add the created@ field to this return statement in the same way as the full name and email fields. Now save the file and let's check if the created@ field is showing or not. Here you see only the full name and email fields are showing. Just refresh the browser and then see. Now see that the value of our created@ field is now also showing in this list view. Now let's add another record. Let's do something different. Instead of entering an email in the email field, we just put a simple text value. Then the remaining values can be entered as normal way. This email field is supposed to display an error message when saving this record. Now, hit the Save button. See here the error message is showing because we defined this field as an email field in the model class. Now let's try saving this record again with an email formatted value. Now click on the Save button to save this record. Great, our second record has also been successfully saved to the database. Now there is one problem, which is to give this list a professional look. Here, the three values of name, email, date seem to be mixed together, right? So let's solve this issue. Let's define a class and name it Client Admin. And inside the parentheses type admin model admin. Now let's declare a variable called list_display and add the names of the columns we want to see here. So we want to see full name, email, and create it as columns in the client list view in the admin panel. So let's add full name, email, and create it inside the parentheses. Now pass the client admin class with a comma in the admin site register. Okay. Now let's save the admin.py file and go to the admin panel to see what our final output looks like. Refresh the browser and see the change. Wow, now our list view looks much more professional than before, right? So we are almost done with this tutorial. The next tutorial is going to be more interesting. So stay connected with me, so that you can get the latest tutorials on machine learning, AI, deep learning, data analysis and data engineering. Hope to see you in the next tutorial. Welcome back everyone. In this tutorial we will be working with the list view in our website. In the last tutorial, we showed data listing, data stores, and other database operations from the Django admin panel. In this tutorial we will show you how to handle that same data from our website. So let's first work with the data list view on our website. Before we start, let's take a look at our website. We will show our client list view on this home page. Let's start working from the view.py file. First we need to import the client model. So to do that, type from .models import clients. The first thing we need to do is grab all the client data. I'm putting comments here for our convenience. So declare an object variable, and in this case I'll call it clients. Then call the client class from the model class. And implement the all function with dot. It will grab all its data from the client table. Now we will pass this client object reference to our home page. One thing to note here is that we will not do any work here on the logic we wrote for login in the if statement. We will mainly work on else statements. So pass this client object reference inside curly brackets. So, put the clients in quotation marks inside the curly brackets and then pass the client's object reference with a colon. Through this, we will send all the client data to the home page. Now let's open the home.html file from the template folder. Now let's delete the text welcome Tanvir from the h1 tag and write client list. Our goal is to ensure that only authenticated users see this list view, so we will view our client list within this authenticate logic code block. Now we will take a Django tag and put an if statement here because first we will check if the client has any data or not. We are actually checking whether the client's data is available from the client object reference that we passed in the views.py file. So inside the Django tag, type if clients. Don't forget to close the if statement. Now we will use a for loop statement inside this if statement. So write for client in clients with the Django tag. Close the for loop. So we will show our client data inside this for loop. Write client to show the data with the Django tag. We are using a break tag here because we will be showing one record per loop. Let's see if our data is showing on the website or not. Oops, what happened? Why is the error showing? Oh, I think I figured out the error. We declared the client model as an object reference, but are we declaring it properly? Let's see. Let's first look at the views file where we declared the object reference. You see, I made a small mistake here. Actually, it wouldn't be right to call it a small mistake, it was a big mistake. Such a mistake is not right at all. Here you have to write .object and then .all function. Let's check again now. I hope everything is fine now. Let's refresh the browser. Great, now the data is showing. Look, this list shows the exact same values that we were showing in the list view of the admin panel. Because if you look at the string function inside your model class, you will see that the column values we have here are exactly the ones that are showing by default. So we'll work a little more on this list view because we need to give it a professional look. Let me tell you one thing, since we have declared the client class as an object reference, this object contains all the client data. So here on the home page we can show any column value. We will also see how to show the value of a specific column. Just put a dot after client and then enter the value of the column you want to see. Like here I am taking the column value of full name here. In this way, enter the values of the columns you want to show. For my convenience, I'll copy and paste this line for now. Then I'll bring in the fields I want to take here. Now, there's an email field here, so let's copy the email field and paste it here. I will also take the phone field in the same way. I will take city field in the same way. Finally, we will also take the created at field. So let's copy and paste it back to the home page. Okay, for now, the field we want to show is brought here. So let's take a look now to see if the fields we wanted to import have arrived or not. Refresh the browser and notice the change. Great, here we see the data for the field we want is being shown. Our email field, phone field, city field and created at field are showing successfully. Great. Well, we also have an auto-generated ID field in this client table, let's show that too. But it's not mandatory. Refresh the browser and check for updates. You see, our ID field is also here. This way, if we want to see more fields here, we can show them too. Now let's add some beauty to our list view. We will use Bootstrap to give it a professional look. We go to the Docs link and then to the Table link under the Content menu. We will use this code base. Let's copy this code. We don't need this div tag, let's remove it. And paste the code we copied here. Here we will just put one tr tag, so remove the other two tr tags and everything inside it. So let's take a look at the output for now, to see if everything is going well or not. Yes, our table is showing. Now let's try to show the data from our client table here. First, change the table headers with the columns we want to show. Finally, two headers are required for created at and ID. So let's copy the last two lines and paste them here. Now give the title created at here. Now write the ID on the last line. Our values will be inside the tbody tag. We need to do a little work here. Since we want the client data to only apply to users who are already logged in, that's why we need to put this entire code block after is authenticated. So paste that code block here. Here, write the title for the table using the h1 tag. Let's move our defined fields inside the tr tag. Paste it here. Remove the tr tag from here and replace it with the break tag. Now we need to enclose each field in a td tag because each of them will be represented as a column and will be aligned with the header of this table. Let's copy and paste the td tag for each field. This copy-paste saves a lot of time, right? I actually think so. Now let's take a look at what our final output looks like. Refresh the browser and then see the change. Great. Our table looks much cleaner now than before, right? So now we have our table list view. Now let's try to give it a more professional look and feel. So let's use Bootstrap again. If you go to the Tables content menu, you will see tables with different looks. Let's use this table primary class. So, inside the class property of this table tag, after table, write table-primary. Let's take a look at the change. Refresh the browser and see the changes. Okay. Look, it looks a little better now than before. Let's improve a little more. Let's look at some more properties from the Bootstrap table documentation. You should definitely check out this official documentation. Okay. Let's make our table have mouse hover features. So copy table-hover. And paste it after the table-primary property. Let's see the change. Notice that the mouse hover is working. Great. Now let's add one last CSS class property to the tbody tag. That's the striped property. This will make our list view look a little more professional. So type table space table-striped. Okay. Now let's look at our final output. Refresh the browser and notice the change. Now look, it looks pretty professional now. Our list view header looks pretty good and the data is hovering over the row. We will go deeper in the next tutorial. Hope you enjoy. So please stay connected with me to get more tutorial on machine learning, AI, data engineering, and data analysis. Hope to see you in the next tutorial. Welcome back everyone. In this tutorial we will be working with the details view in our website. In the last tutorial, we showed a list view of our client data on our website. In this tutorial, we will display the details of a specific client from that list view. So in the last tutorial we worked on this list view. Now we will see how to click on a specific data from this list view and see the details info of the clicked client. You all have already understood that for a new page we have to do three things. First we have to define the URL, then define a function in the views file and finally create an HTML page, right? So now I'm going to define a URL for our details view page. For my convenience, I'm copying the previous URL statement. So here, let's change the register text to client. And then to pass an integer value inside angle brackets with a / right int colon pk. Here pk stands for primary key. Now similarly write client for views. And finally, write name equals client. So, the URL statement we wrote here will actually represent something like localhost :8000. Then, /client/id. Here ID is basically the client primary key. So this is exactly how the URL will be called in the browser. Now let's define a function called client in the views.py file. So let's create a function called client. Okay, type def client. Now, as usual, pass the request parameters in parentheses along with the primary key pk. We need to pass this primary key because we will retrieve the details info of a specific client. If you go to your URLs file, you will see that I have passed pk as an integer value here. So since we will only show client details to users who are already logged in, that's why we will use an if statement to check the user's login authentication status. So type if request.user.is_authenticated. If it is an authenticated user, we will show that user the data of a specific client on our details page. If you want to implement this kind of logic, it's a good idea to get into the habit of writing some comments. I encourage everyone to write comments. These comments are very useful when projects become very large and complex and many developers are involved. Now let's declare a variable called client_record. And assign a specific client ID from the client object. Here, by ID we mean the client's primary key. Notice here that we have defined object.get in our client function. And I defined object.all inside the home function. So this object.all basically retrieves all the client data from the database as objects. And here object.get is basically retrieving data from a specific client. If we take a look at the file that was created during the migration, the matter will become more clear. Here you see the ID field defined as the primary key. Now I hope the matter is completely clear to all of you. Now let's take the authenticated user to the client details page using the return render statement. Here I am declaring a page named client.html to display client details which I will create inside the template folder. Then, inside the curly brackets, we will pass our client record variable, which is carrying the full details of a specific client. So far we've been working with the if statement. Now we need an else statement because if the user isn't authenticated, we need to redirect to the home page. Right? First, let's show a message to those who are not authenticated users. So type message.success, then inside the parentheses write request, then write a message with a comma. In this case, I am writing a message with, you have to log in. Now, as I said before, I will redirect the home page to the unauthenticated user. Now let's create an HTML page in the template folder called client.html. We will show the client's detailed info on this page. So before that, let's copy the extend tag and block content tag from the home page and paste it on the client page. Don't forget to end the block. Let's write client info with the h1 tag and check whether everything we did is working properly or not. So let's type client in the address bar of the web browser after port 8000 followed by a slash and then enter a client ID followed by a slash again. In this case, I am putting 1 as the client ID. Great. Our desired page is showing now. Now let's log out and check again and see if our else statement is working properly or not. We again type client/1 after port 8000 in the browser's address bar and then hit enter. Look, the message we gave in the else statement is showing. Great. So our logic is working properly. I logged in again and typed client/1 in the address bar in the same way and hit enter. Okay, perfect. Everything is working fine so far. Now let's move forward. Let's find a way to show the client details according to our plan. We will now use the variable we declared in the views file called client record. Just put the client record variable in the client page with the Django tag. Let's check if we are getting the desired output. Wow! Our desired output is showing. Great. Notice here that the client ID is 1 in the browser's address bar. Now if we change the client ID to 2, we will see another output. Look, John's details are now showing. Great. Let's work on some more details. Let's go to the URLs file first. As you already know, we are passing the ID of a client to get its details. So, in the client list that we are showing on our home page, we need to use a clickable link so that the user can click on that link to see the details of a specific client from the client list and see the client details on the client page. So in this case I will make the name field clickable, so I am using the ahref tag here. Similarly, you can make any other field clickable if you want. As you can see here, from this client list, we want to click on a specific name to view the details of that client. This is our plan for now. Let's add a hashtag to the href tag and check if our name field is clickable or not. Refresh the web browser and notice the change. Notice that the name field now shows an underline, so it has now become a clickable link. A URL is showing with a hashtag in the bottom left corner of the window. Now let's replace the hashtag with the Django tag and define our URL inside it. So inside the Django tag, type URL, then inside the quotation marks with a space, type client, as we defined in the urls.py file. I also passed the client ID in the urls.py file, so I am passing the client ID here as well. Now it's time to check. Let's see if it's working properly. Refresh the browser, then click on a client's name. Great. It's working perfectly. Look, Tanvir's details are showing here. Now let's see if John's details show or not. Now I'll click on John's name. Great. Here we are also seeing John's details. Notice here that the client's default data is being shown as we defined it in the model class. Now let's display the data as per our needs. For the convenience of our work, let's copy this code from the home page and move it to the client page. Paste the copied code here. Now let's remove the ahref tags. I also delete the td tags. It would be good to do line alignment. Now replace the client variable with the client record variable. Let's take advantage of copy-paste again. We don't need to put the client record tag here, so remove it. I hope you understand where the client record variable comes from. We declared it here inside the client function in the views file. Now let's check what data is shown on our website regarding client details. First, refresh the browser, then click on the name of the client whose details we want to see. Great, the data is showing. Now let's format the data a little so that it's easier for us to see. Just add a break tag after each field. Let's take advantage of copy-paste again. Actually, this copy-paste thing is very useful. Now let's check again to see what our final output looks like. Just refresh your web browser and see the change. Great. Now it looks much cleaner than before. Right? Okay, that's it for now. We'll go deeper in the next tutorial. So stay connected with me because more tutorials on machine learning, AI, deep learning, data analysis, and data engineering are coming very soon. Welcome back everyone. We will implement Bootstrap cards in this tutorial, which will help give a professional look to the client details view. In the last tutorial, we saw how to retrieve the details info of a specific client from the list view of clients. We will now implement Bootstrap cards in the client's details info. So let's take a look at the card components from the official Bootstrap documentation. The card link should be inside the components menu. Yes, look, here is the card link. So let's see what card components are available and which card would be right for us to implement. You see, there are many types of card components here. It seems we've found a card that suits our needs. We can use this card component, but you can use any other card if you want. So let's copy this code base. For now, let's paste the copied code here. Now let's check if the card is showing up in our project or not. Reload the web browser and see the changes. Yes, you see our card component is showing. So let's arrange to represent our client's data inside this card. I think the client's full name should be shown in the card header. So copy and replace it with featured. Now let's pass the email field data to the card title. So let's copy it again and replace it with the special title treatment title in the card title. Now enter the remaining field data inside the card text section. So let's use copy-paste again. Let's delete all this text and paste the phone field here. I will bring in the remaining fields one by one with break tags. Copy both the city and created at fields. Paste these two copied fields here after the break tag. Now let's take a look at the output. Reload the web browser and notice the change. Look, our client's data is now showing on the card. Great. Let's delete this code. We don't need it anymore. Now let's look at the output again. You'll see that it's much clearer than before. Reload the browser and look at the output. Look, as I said, it looks pretty clear now. Let's do a random check. Just click to see the details of a randomly selected client from the list view, and here I am seeing the details info of that client. It is a good practice to have a habit of doing random checks like this. Although this is a fairly small project, it is a good idea to do random checks during development for large and complex projects. Not many developers do such checks, but it is good to do it. Now let's introduce a back button so that user can click on that back button to go to the home page. So to do that, use the Django tag inside the href tag and give the URL of the home page. Inside the Django tag, type URL, then inside the quotes, type home. Okay. Now let's see what our final output looks like. Reload the browser first, then click on a client from this list to view its details. Then click the back button. Try doing the same thing randomly. This is also part of checking. Actually, I give priority to this type of checking. Because if there is a very small problem and you ignore it, it becomes a big headache later. Because most of the time, I see that many people ignore very small problems thinking that they will fix them later and forget as usual, and when the development becomes quite big and complex, then those small problems come to the fore in a big way. So that's it for today. Our next tutorial is going to be more interesting. So stay connected with me because more tutorials on machine learning, AI, deep learning, data analysis, and data engineering are coming very soon. Welcome back everyone. At this stage, let's learn how to delete data. This is actually going to be a pretty easy task. In the last tutorial, we looked at retrieving the details data of a specific client from a list of clients. So now we will place a delete button next to the go back button to delete this client's data. So let's get started. We have already learned that implementing a new feature usually involves 3 steps: adding a URL, creating a function in the views file, and finally creating an HTML page. But we don't need any additional HTML files for this delete feature. So for the convenience of work here, I have copied the URL line above and pasted it below. Now change the text as we need. In this case, I changed the text client to client_delete. And I'm changing the rest of the text in the same way. Here you have to pass the client's ID just like in the above URL. Now let's declare a function called client_delete in the views.py file. As usual, pass the request and primary key as in the previous function. Now the first thing we need to do is check user authentication. We will only allow authenticated users to delete. So let's copy this if statement and paste it here. Now let's define a variable and name it delete record, where we will retrieve the ID of a specific client. And we will assign that client ID to this delete record variable. So type client.objects.get, then inside the parentheses write ID equals pk. You shouldn't have any problem understanding this because I explained it in the previous tutorial. To delete the retrieved client, the delete method needs to be called. So type delete_record. Then call the delete method. So if the delete is successful, now we should give a message. So let's write a message. So, put the request parameters inside the parentheses and write a message. I am writing the message you have successfully deleted. In fact, the functions for retrieving, updating, and deleting specific data are almost identical, with just a few basic differences. Now, if the data is successfully deleted, I will redirect the user to the home page. Now we need an else statement, where we will send an alert message and redirect to the home page if an unauthenticated user tries to perform this delete operation. In this case, I will give the message you have to log in. And I will redirect to the home page. Now save the view file. Next we need to add a delete button to our client.html page. So let's go to the client.html page and introduce the delete button. For convenience, copy the code of this go back button and paste it below. From the urls.py file we copy this text client_delete. And in the client.html file, delete the text home inside the Django URL tag and paste the copied text here. Now we need to pass our client ID here. Then type client_record.id with a space. Here, in the class properties, remove the text primary and write danger. And write the name of the button as delete. Let's save the file and check it. First reload the web browser, then click on the name of a specific client to go to the details view. Now let's delete this record by clicking the delete button. Great! We were able to successfully delete and you see our success message showing here. So far we have been able to complete the work up to the client list view, their details info and now deletion. Great. Next, we need to add a new client and update the client's info, which we will see in the next tutorial. So that's it for today. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please subscribe. So stay connected with me because more tutorials on machine learning, AI, deep learning, data analysis, and data engineering are coming very soon. Welcome back everyone. We saw in the last tutorial how to retrieve and display the client's list view and its details info. So now let's see how to insert a new client. Here you see the client's detail info from the client list view and now the delete feature. So let's start working on the feature of adding a new client. So first let's go to the urls.py file and declare a new URL path to add a new client. For the convenience of my work, I am copying the URL path of the register. And I'm pasting it at the very end. Now I'm replacing the text register here with add_client. As usual, after views. Write add_client. And also assign add_client as the name. Now let's go to the views.py file and create a function called add_client. And as usual, put the request parameter inside the parentheses. Now we need a return statement where we need to define an HTML page to add a new client. And here change the text home.html to add_client.html. And for now, leave the curly brackets blank. Later we will pass our client add form inside these curly brackets. Now let's create the add_client.html page inside the template folder. Now let's copy the extends tag, block content tag, and if statement from the home.html page and paste them into our newly created add_client page. Don't forget to close the if statement and block content tags. Here, I'm writing the title add new client with an h1 tag for our new page. We will add a new button on this client list page right after the title client list. So that by clicking on that button we can go to the page to add new clients. So let's add a button below the title on the home.html page. Using a break tag, write the code for the button on the line just below it. I'm actually copying the code for the delete button and pasting it here. Now let's change the class property and write primary. Now change the text delete to add new. Now let's update the URL link. First, we will remove the client ID parameter because we will not be passing any existing client ID to this URL. because here you see we are not passing any ID in this URLs file. And remove this delete client text. And paste the add_client copied from the URLs file. Now let's check if our new button is showing or not. Reload the browser and see the change. Here you see the add new button. I'll put the button inside the p tag because it will look a little cleaner. Let's check again and notice the change. Now look, it looks a little better now. Actually, it's not such a big deal. Let's click on the add new button and see if we can go to the new page. Wow, we were able to successfully access the new page. Now since we need to develop a form to add new clients, like the registration form, it also needs to use the post method and the Django CSRF token tag. Here I am copying the form post and Django CSRF token tags from the registration page. Actually, the copy-paste feature saves a lot of time. So let's paste the code we copied just after the h1 tag on the add client page. Here, inside the action, use the URL Django tag to write the property named addClient that we defined in the urls.py file. Here you see, in the urls.py file, I defined addClient in the name property. So, copy it and paste it here. Now we will use form.as_p Django tag after our CSRF token tag. Because here we will load our client add form. You already know that to load a Django form, you have to use this form as p tag. Now, let's copy the code for the register button from the register page for our convenience. And paste it under the form p tag. Don't forget to align the form closing tag. Now let's go to the form.py file and create a form to insert a client record. First we need to import the client model class. So type from .models import client. This will allow us to access all the fields in the client table. Now let's define a class for the client add form. It would be great if we maintain some comments for this form, because we will define more forms in this file later. Now we will define a class called add client form. And inside the parentheses, write forms.modelForm. This model form will actually help us assign field properties to the client's model class we defined. The full name, email, phone and other fields of the model class can be easily relate with the properties of the form class we defined. Now let's define the client fields whose data we want to insert into the database through the client form, in this add client form class. First we will take the full name. Then I'll get the email. Then I'll take the phone number. This may sound a little boring, but we have to define them this way. Then I'll take the address field. Let's take a look at what other fields are left from the model class. Okay, city, state, zip code and created@ fields are left. So take the city field. Now define the state field. Now that the zip code is left, take the zip code field as well. Let's check again to see if there are any fields left. Oh, the created@ field is left out. Let's add this field too. Okay, to make our work easier at this stage, let's copy the text input code for full name from the fields we defined for the registration form. So let's copy this code. And paste it in this full name field. And for the email field, copy it from the registration form in the same way. And paste it along with this email field. Since I defined the remaining fields as character fields, I can copy the full name input field and apply it to all the remaining fields. So let's copy it. And paste for all the remaining fields respectively. Just take a look here, change the title that is in the placeholder here and write the placeholder title for your respective field. So here I'm writing the placeholder title phone for the phone field. Now do the same for the remaining fields. Let me tell you a little bit, if you want to use any other input type like drop-down, radio button or text box here, change char field to the field type you want to use. You can take help from Django official documentation for this. Well, you remember that we had set the created@ field data to be auto-inserted into the database as the current date time by default. So we don't need to put this field in the form here. Let's delete it, it's not needed, the database itself is capable of handling it. Now let's define the meta class, where we will assign a model class named client. So write model equals client. We will not insert any data of the logged-in user into this table, so we will exclude it. So type exclude equals. Then type user in parentheses with quotation marks. Put a comma at the end and then save the file. Now let's implement some logic in the views file. First of all, let's import our addClientForm class. Now inside the addClient function, let's declare an object called form. Assign the just imported addClientForm class as an object reference. And inside the parentheses we pass the request and post methods, just like we did during registration. The difference with registration is that here you have to use the OR function and give none, because it will help to check if a user wants to insert data by leaving the form blank. Now we need to check whether the user is authenticated or not. So for that, we copied the if condition from our function above and pasted it here. I'll write the logic for the if condition later. Let's complete the logic for the else condition first. So if the user is not authenticated, we will first show the user a message and redirect them to the home page. So, type message.success. Then pass the request parameters inside the parentheses. Then add a comma and then a message inside the quotation marks. I am writing the message you have to log in to add new record. And let's redirect to the home page. So type return redirect then type home inside the quotation marks. That's enough for the else condition. Now let's implement the logic for the if condition. We will use another if condition where we will check the post method. So type if request.method equals then type post inside the quotation marks. Now we need to validate the form, so inside this if condition we will have another if condition where we will check whether the form is valid. So type if space form.is valid. This is actually a built-in field validator in Django that validates the fields defined in the model class. Now let's define an object called add_client that will save the client's data to the database. So let's call the form.save method to save the client's data to the database. Now, when the data is saved, a success message should be shown to the user, right? So write message.success. Then, as usual, pass the request parameters inside the parentheses and write a message. In this case, I am writing the message new client added. Now we will redirect the user to the home page where we have a list view of our clients. We missed one thing. That is, if the user is authenticated, we should take them to the client add page, right? So if you are an authenticated user, write return random then pass the request parameters inside the parentheses. Then put a comma. And give this file name to the add client page that we created. Here we paste addClient.html. Again, put a comma and pass the form inside the Django tag. We will basically pass this form object where we have defined an object reference named addClientForm. So inside the Django tag write form:form. So now save the file and let's take a look at the output of the work we've been doing so far. We are already on the add new client page, so we just need to reload the page. Wow! Our form is showing here. Let's start from home page. Click on the add new button. OK. Showing the form to add a new client. So let's fill out this form to add a new client. I entered my full name as Robin. Now I am using the same name Robin as my email address. I'm giving you a random phone number here. I'm entering a random address in the same way. Here I am entering Dhaka as a city and state. I actually live in this city. Finally, enter the zip code and click this button to save it to the database. Wow, look, our new client's data has been successfully saved. We also see the success message here. Now let's log out. And try to access the form to add a new client. So to do that, enter the URL link to add the client in the address bar and hit enter. Here you see the message you have to log in showing. So our logic is working successfully. Nice. Now let's log in and see if we can access the client add form. OK. Log in successfully and we can access our form by clicking the add new button. We will now add another new client and see if everything is working properly. Now I am filling out the form with the name Tanya. I don't know if this email address exists. I'm just entering a random email. Now enter the remaining fields such as address, city, state, and zip code. Now click on this button to save. The button name here should have been save. Anyway, our new client has been successfully saved. Here you see our new client is showing in this list. And by clicking on the name we can see its details and the back button is also working properly. Now let's add another new client and later we will delete this record, so that we can check whether the delete feature is working properly or not. Here I am adding a client named test data. Finally, enter the zip code and save. Great. New client successfully saved. Let's delete it now. Wow. Delete also worked properly. Great. Now let's look at our database. We need to look at the database too. Let's access the client table from our MySQL database. I have mentioned before that I am using a plugin for VS Code to access the database. Here you see that our last two added clients are showing and the deleted client named test data is not here. And you see that the created at field is also autofilled according to the date time of the form filling. So that's it for today. So stay connected with me because more tutorials on machine learning, AI, deep learning, data analysis, and data engineering are coming very soon. Thank you for now, see you in our next tutorial. Welcome back everyone. At this stage we will update the client's details info. So let's get started. The work we have completed so far is user registration, login logout, list view and its details showing, inserting new records and deleting records. So now all that is left is to update the records. So let's go back to the code editor. As usual, we will start working from the urls.py file. I am copying the URL that I defined to delete and pasting it here on the last line. Okay, let's change the text delete to update. Note here, since I will be updating the record, I need the client ID, so like the delete feature, I am passing the ID for the update as well. So now let's change delete to update for views as well. I also change the name in the same way. Now let's define a function called client_update in the views file. So define client_update and give the request parameters inside parentheses as usual. For convenience, let's copy some code from the delete function. Because there are some things that are similar to updating. I'll explain the reason for this later. I said earlier that we need the client ID to update and the user must be authenticated to update, so I have copied some of the delete code here. I hope the reason for the copy is now clear to all of you. Now, once the user is authenticated, the user needs to be given access to the update page, so here we are redirecting to the client update.html page. Now let's add an else statement, because if the user is not authenticated, we should give the user a message and redirect to the home page. Right? In this case, I am giving the message you have to log in. Then redirect the user to the home page. Now we need to implement some logic if the user is authenticated. We first need to get the ID of the record we want to update. Right? So I'm creating a reference called current_record where we'll get the ID of the selected client. We will do the same thing here as we did to get the ID for deletion. So let's retrieve the client ID in the same way. So type client.objects.get then put ID equals pk inside the parentheses. For the update, we will use the same form we used to save it. So let's copy this and paste it for the update function. To update here, all the properties of this form will remain the same, like adding a record. I'll just add one additional property, which is instance. Its main function is that when we update the data of a specific client, it will fill the form with the data of that selected client. So write instance equals current_record. Notice here that like data insert, we have used request.post or none. You already know its functionality, but I'm saying it again, it basically requires that the form is filled or the form will be filled or it is empty. If the form is filled, it will start storing the form data in the database. So, to check the post method like client add, we need an if statement. That's why I pasted this if statement here. Now we need another if statement to validate the form. So, type if space form dot is underscore valid. Now let's create an object reference called update_client and call the save method. So type form.save. After the save is successful, let's show a message to the user. In this case I am giving a message like client info updated. So type client info updated with the request inside the parentheses. Now let's redirect the user to the home page. So inside the parentheses write return redirect and inside the quotation marks write home. Now pass the form as a parameter in the return render statement, like add client. So let's copy this form from the add client function and paste it here. Now let's create an HTML file called client understanding update in the template folder. Now let's copy the entire code from the add client HTML file. In fact, both record addition and record update require almost the same work. We don't need the action property here, so let's delete it. Like this record add, we will also use the form.asp Django tag to update the record. Let's change the button text from save to update. Now we have one more task left, that is, since we want to update from the client details page, let's add a button for update on the details page. I am copying the code of the delete button here because like delete, you also need to pass the client ID for updating. You already know this, right? So, paste the copied code right after the delete button. And change the text delete to update. You probably remember that we defined a URL in the URLs file to update the client. So let's copy client_update and paste it here. And here I am passing the client's ID. So let's do a brief summary. When the user clicks on the update button from the details page, it will populate the update form with the details of that selected client on the details page according to that client's ID. And after updating the client's info, when the user clicks the update button, the data will be updated using the Django form tag through the update function defined in the views file, through the form post. Here you see the Django form tag defined after the token tag, and as you already know, I have used the client add form here. In fact, data transactions are made from the HTML page to the views update function through this Django form tag. This is actually a good feature of Django. It saves a lot of work. Here you see how the client ID is being passed from the details page and which is calling the views function defined in the URLs file with the client ID. I hope you all understand the matter. If you still have any questions, you can ask me through the comments below. Now let's save the files and see our output. Before looking at the output, let's terminate our server and run it again. Although it's not necessary, it's good practice to reload the server after making any major changes. Okay, our server is running, now let's look at our output. Reload the browser first. Click on any client's name from the client list to view their details on the details page. Look here, our update button has been shown. By clicking on the update button, you will see that the client's details info is being shown in the update form. Let's update the data in the address field. Then click the update button to update the data. Great, the data has been updated. You see the success message above. Let's take a look at the update on the details page again. Here you see the update. Now let's add a new client by clicking the Add New button. Here I am writing my full name Tanvir Rahman. I am entering my personal email address here. Just enter a random phone number. It's not actually a valid phone number. I'm giving you a random address in the same way. Entering the city, state, and zip code. And click the Save button to save. Okay, we have successfully added a new client. And look, its ID is 13. So let's look at the details of this client. Take note of this address here. Let's do some updates to this client now. In this case, let's update the name of this client. Then hit the update button. It has been successfully updated and you see that its ID is remained same, which is 13. We should change the color of the update button. Go to the client page. And change the danger text to secondary. Let's go to the browser and see the change. Just reload the browser. Look, the color of the update button has changed, it looks quite appropriate now. Now let's do the final check. In this case, I will update the last updated record. Here I am just updating the name and address. Click Update button to update. Okay, I see the client for ID 13 has been updated. Okay, now let's check the authentication. To do that, just copy this link. And now I'm logging out. Now let's enter that copied link into the browser's address bar and hit enter to access the details of the client with ID number 13. You see, we can see the message you have to log in. Okay, so we've almost completed the project. We registered users, added new clients, showed client lists, updated client records, and updated records. Now let's push the work we've completed so far to the GitHub repository. In fact, this CRUD operation is applicable to almost all types of websites, be it a business application or a dynamic website or a social networking site like Facebook, Twitter or Instagram. No matter what you say, this CRUD operation is performed. We will develop features for searching operations, PDF and Excel report generation in the next tutorial. And finally we will Dockerize this project. Okay, our project has been pushed to the repository. Now let's check the GitHub repository to see if our project has been successfully pushed or not. You see, the message that was commented on when I just pushed to Git is showing here. You can find the full project in this Git repository. I have given the Git link of this repository in the description box. So that's it for today. So stay connected with me because more tutorials on machine learning, AI, deep learning, data analysis, and data engineering are coming very soon. Thank you for now, see you in our next tutorial. Welcome back everyone. At this stage we will work on relational DB table operation. The work we have completed so far is user registration, login logout, list view and its details showing, inserting new records, updating record and deleting records. So now we're going to do a little complex operation. So let's get started. So our initial plan is to view client-wise product purchase details from the list view on the home page and sell the product to a client. I won't focus too much on UI UX here, I'll just show the main functionality here. So let's create a product table where the client table will be referenced as a foreign table. Because we will be selling our product to some client. Right? So let's create a model class called product. And as usual, write models.model inside the parentheses. Now let's define a field called client, which is actually a foreign key for the product table. Here the foreign key is actually referring to the ID of the client table. So refer to the client table inside the parentheses. Here put on_delete equals models.cascade. The on_delete equals models.cascade option is used in Django's models to specify that when a referenced object is deleted, the objects that reference it should also be deleted. It's a way to maintain referential integrity in your database. The attribute is related_name, very useful in Django when you want to give a meaningful name to the reverse relationship. Using related_name can make your code more readable. Actually, by default, Django would use something like product_set if no related_name is specified. Instead of accessing the related products from a client object using client.product_set.all, you can use client.products.all, which is much clearer and easier to understand. I will share more details on this topic later in this tutorial. Now let's define a character field called product name. Its max length will be 100. You can give a length value larger than this if you want. Now let's define a decimal field called price. Our goal is to sell each product to each client at different prices. Here I will give the maximum digit as 10, you can give a larger number if you need. And I will give the decimal place value too. I think this is the standard format. And finally we will define a date field. Here I have chosen datetime field as the field type, where I will set auto now add equals true so that the current date and time are automatically set when storing new data. Now let's define the string function as usual. There is no need to explain anything new about it because you all already know it and what I have discussed in the previous tutorial. Since we have defined a new model, we need to run the make migrations and migrate commands. Right? I hope you all know the reason for this already because we discussed it in detail in the earlier tutorial. So first run the make migrations command. Yes, it has completed successfully. And you see a new py file has been created in the migrations folder. Now let's run the migrate command. So type python manage.py migrate and hit enter. Great, this also has been completed successfully. Now let's register this product module in the admin panel. So create a class called productAdmin. And pass admin.modelAdmin inside the parentheses. Now let's define a list of the fields we want to see data for in the admin panel. In this case, I want to see the client's name in the admin list. Then I want to see the name of the product. So I copied the product underscore name from here and pasted into this list. And finally, I want to see the price in the admin list. So I copy that too. And I pasted it here. For now, I want to see the data of this field in the list in the admin panel. Now let's run the server. Okay, the server is up and running. Now let's get to the admin panel. Oh, where is our product menu? Why isn't it showing? It seems I haven't registered our product module in admin. Let's check. Yes, my assumption is correct, we did not register the product module in the admin. Let's register in the admin. So, type admin.site.register. Then, inside the parentheses, we pass our model class product and the product admin class. But before that we need to import the product model class. Now, inside the parentheses, we pass the product model class and the product admin class. Now save the file and let's check in the admin panel whether our product menu is there or not. Reload the web browser first. Yes. Look, our product menu is now showing. Great. Let's insert some random data. Notice here that our client field is showing as a dropdown and all the client data is showing as an object in this dropdown because it will store only the client ID as a foreign key. Now let's fill in the remaining fields. And click the Save and Another button to enter some more data for another client. After this, we will work on our web application, which will be quite interesting and a bit complex. But I can assure you that I hope I can explain it to you in a very simple way. Here you see I've already inserted some records which you see in this list in the admin panel. Now our next task will be how to handle relational table operations in our web application. So we will introduce a link next to the ID of this list. When we click on that link, we will show the product purchase history of a specific client and also show the sale of a new product to that client. So let's get back to work. Actually, from now on, the work will start getting a little complex, as I said at the beginning. I would like to request you to watch my previous tutorials if you haven't watched them first. Click on the I button above to get the tutorial series. The link is also given in the description box below. So first we go to the home page and introduce a link called Products here, and by clicking on that link we want to see the product purchase history of a specific client. Here write product in the URL which we will define in the urls.py file. So let's go to the urls.py file. For convenience, let's copy this line and paste it here on the last line. Here, in the list view of the home page, product is given as the URL action. This is what we need to define in the urls.py file. You already know this process. And here you see I'm passing the client ID to the URL. Now let's declare a function called product in the views.py file. You also know this process. I'm maintaining comments here. Actually, it's a good habit to maintain it. Okay. Now let's define a function called product. And as usual, we need to pass request and client ID inside the parentheses. Because we will be looking at the product purchase history of a specific client. Right? The first thing we will do is check user authentication. So let's copy this authentication check statement. If you have any confusion about this, check out the previous tutorials. Now let's first retrieve the client's ID and assign it to a variable called client. Here we take the client model class inside the parentheses and assign its primary key as ID. Now let's retrieve the list of products. So here I declared a variable called products. We will fetch the product list according to the client's ID. So to get the product list according to the client, type client.product. Let me clarify something that I mentioned at the beginning of this tutorial. Here in the model class I gave related name equals product. So through this we can easily retrieve the client's ID. That's why we can write client.product.all here. Otherwise we would have to write client.product_set.all, which is not entirely understandable. I was also talking about this earlier in this tutorial when creating the model class. Now we will give a return render statement where we will call the product.html page with the request parameter and pass the client and products variables. Now let's write an else statement, because if the user is not authenticated, we will show a message and redirect him to the home page. In this case, I want to give the message you have to log in first. And redirect to home page. Now let's create the products.html page in the template folder. My initial goal is to just show the product purchase history of a specific client. Here I am copying common codes from another HTML page. These codes are actually used in more or less all pages. This is the main reason for copying. Here, first I change the text of the h1 tag to product purchase. Notice here that this code already contains the specified client info. Now what we need to do is to display the products that the client has purchased as a list form. For this, we captured a list of products purchased by a specific client in this views file. So we will show these products in list form using a loop. So let's run a loop of products here. I'm replacing service with product. Here I also replace all variables name with product. Next I will change the names of the fields defined in this product model. So first, let's change the service text to product, because we've looped through the product. Now we will take the fields from the product model. Let's take the product name field first. Replace the service name text with product name. Now let's take the price field. In the same way, replace the text amount with the text price. And finally, let's take the date field. And replace the text service date with the text date. Okay, we've pretty much completed our initial work. Oh, one last thing left to do. Here, above the h1 tag, there is a button. This button will be needed to add a product. So let's change the text of this button to new product. Here I will change the URL action name of the new product button later. Let's see if the URL action name product is given on our home page or not. Yes, it is given here. Through this, we can access the product page. Reload the browser and see the change. Look here, a link called product is showing with each record. Click on any of the links. Here you see a purchase history of client ID number 13. Let's go back to the editor here. You can see that the URL action new service is given to the new product button. Clicking on the new product button will redirect you to the new service page. So now we will use this new product button to enter a new product purchase record. Now let's name the URL action new product so that we can enter a new product purchase record. Now we need to define a path called new product in the urls.py file. So let's go to the urls file. I'll copy this line for convenience and paste it at the very end. Now we need to give the URL action name that we gave for the new product button on the product page to this URL path. Here, enter the text new_product as the name, views, and path respectively. Now, let's create a function called new_product in the views.py file. Now let's go to the views file and create the new_product function. It's actually a good practice to write a comment before writing a function so that we can keep track of each function. So define the new_product function. And as usual, pass the request and client ID parameters inside the parentheses. Now first we need to check the user authentication, so let's apply an if condition to check the user authentication. Now we need to declare a variable called client, which will get the ID of the selected client. You already know how to retrieve the ID of a specific client. Now let's bring the products purchased by the client. Although it was not needed, I am still keeping it in case I need it later. Now since we will be entering product purchase records, we need to do this through a form, so we need the post method. Now we need to declare an object reference for our form, so let's create an object reference called form. Oh! Have we developed any form for this yet in the forms.py file? We haven't developed any form for this yet. Let's first create a form for this in the forms.py file. Okay, let's create a class called newProductForm and pass the forms.modelForm parameter inside the parentheses as usual. Before moving forward, let's first import our product model class. For my convenience, I am copying the above field and its properties and paste it under the newProductForm class. I copied this because the form properties of the service form and the properties of the product form are almost the same. Now let's see which field properties can be added to this form from the product model class. Here we will only consider the price and product name fields, where we will auto-set the client ID. Here I replaced service name with product name. And replace amount with price. OK. Now we need to change the placeholder text. Here I will write enter price in the placeholder. And for the next line, write product name. Now we need to define the meta class. Now assign the model class as usual. Here the model will be the product class. Now define the fields. Here, I want to put the product name field first in the form and then the price field. So first I will put the product name in the array and then the price. Now we need to write the init function where we will set the client's ID through the keyword argument. Since I did the same thing for the service form, I copied the code block from there. This code block basically works in 4 steps. Step 1, Initialization method. The init method initializes a new object. Step 2, args and quargs. These are used to pass a variable number of arguments and keyword arguments to the method. Step 3, Extracting client. Extracts the value of the keyword argument client from quargs and assigns it to self.client. Step 4, Calling the superclasses init. Calls the initializer of the superclass, passing along any remaining args and quargs. Now let's go back to the views file again. The first thing we need to do is import our new product form class. So, import it. Now let's implement the functionality for the new product form. So, after checking the post method in the if statement, let's define an object reference for new product form called form. This is where we will get and assign the current client's ID. Now let's check if the form is valid. So write if and as usual write form.isValid as we wrote in the case of other forms. Now if the form is valid, I will declare a variable called product and where I will save the form value, but here I will set the commit to false, which means I will not save the form data to the database right now. Now we are assigning the client ID to the client of this particular product, which means we will setting the ID of our current client for the product table. Now we will finally save the form. Now let's give a message to the user if the save is successful. In this case, I am giving the message product added successfully. And after that I will redirect to the product page. Now I will redirect to the product page. At this stage, we need an else statement because we need to give the user a message if the data is not saved. In this case I am giving the message product not added. Since the product is not saved in the database, we will initiate the form again by calling the URL action new product. Here, the new product action actually refers to the URL action, which we defined as a name in the urls.py file. So far we have seen what to do if the form is valid and what to do if it is not valid. Now we will see what to do if the form data is not posted. We will do the same thing here as in the previous line, that is, initiate the form again by calling the URL action new product. Although this else condition could have been avoided. It could have been done by redirecting the user to the list view page with a message. Now we will define new product.html in the return render statement. And also pass the form through the Django tag. Everything I've done so far is form related. Now let's write the final else statement, where we'll provide the logic for what to do if the user isn't authenticated. In that case, I will show a message to the user and redirect to the home page. You can implement other logic if you want. But for now, I will show a message and redirect to the home page. That's all I will do, I won't make it too complex. Now let's create a new page called new_product.html. For convenience, I am copying this code from the new service page. Actually, you already know about this codebase, we discussed the details while developing the registration feature, so I don't see much discussion about it here. Still, if you have any questions, you can ask them in the comments. Here, I am just changing the service text in the h1 tag to product. Now let's run the project. Let's go to home page first. Click on any product link. Now click the New Product button. So let's add a record, which is adding a record for client ID 4. You can see it by looking at the address bar of the browser. Now hit the Update button. Nice. You see, our new record has been added. Let's add another record. Here I gave 565234 as the price. Now hit the Update button. Great, this record has also been updated. Now let's add another record for another client. Notice here that the ID of this client is 13. We will now add a record for this client. Here you see that this client only has one product purchase item. Let's add another product for this client. Enter the product name and price and hit Update button to insert this record for the client ID 13. Now look here, there are two records showing for this client 13. So we have learned the use and implementation of relational database with Django. Great. In my next tutorial, I will show how to export data as PDF and CSV. So that's it for today. So stay connected with me because more tutorials on machine learning, AI, deep learning, data analysis, and data engineering are coming very soon. Thank you for now, see you in our next tutorial. Welcome back everyone. At this stage, we will work on client search or filtering features. For now, my plan is to develop a very basic searching or filtering feature because it will be easier for you to understand. But I will also show the advanced level in another tutorial. The work we have completed so far is user registration, login logout, list view and its details showing, inserting new records, updating record and deleting records. So now we will add the search feature. So our target is to have a search box above this list view, where the user can type something and search. So let's get started. So since we will show the search box on the home page, we will show this search box below the buttons and above the list. So I'll take a p tag here and show our form inside it. Then inside the p tag, we will have a form tag for the search feature. Now inside the form tag, we will have a text input field where we will basically write something to search for. So type input type equals text. Write Q in the name property. Q here means query. You can write anything else here. Now we will take a placeholder property of this search box where we will write search by name or city. Now we need a search button. So let's add a search button so that the user can type a name or city in the input box and click on this search button. Although the same task can be accomplished without the search button, we will learn that in another tutorial. Now save the file and let's check it out. Great, our search box is showing. So here we will search by typing something in this search box and clicking the search button. So let's go back to the code editor. So now what we need to do is, after hitting the search button, we need to perform an action on the search text and for this, as we all know, we need to write a function in the views file. I am maintaining some comments for this code block. Before writing the function, we need to declare a Django package named Q. This is a built-in package of Django. So type from django.db.models. Then import Q. Here the Q object in Django's ORM is used to create complex queries by combining different conditions using logical operators. It helps to build more sophisticated queries. Before writing the function, let's define a path for the search in the URLs file. I'll name it search_client. I usually try to keep the same name in the views file and for the name property as well. Now let's define a function called search_client as we have given the path name in the URLs file. And pass the request parameters as usual. Now we will declare a variable called query. And this variable will basically be assigned the text we type in our search box. Now we will pass Q as the key inside the get method and pass an empty parameter. Here basically the name equals Q that we gave in the search box on the home page is being mapped as the key. In fact, this empty parameter will be mapped to the text value that we will write in the search box to search. Now let's declare an empty array called results where our search query results will actually be stored as an array. Now let's use an if condition for the query, where we will put the data retrieved for client based on the search filter into the result array. Now if there is a query and there is some client data, we will store that client data in the result array. Now write object.filter. And call the Q object inside the parentheses. Now we will take the first name field defined in the model class. And paste it as a parameter to the Q object. Now write iContains with first name followed by underscore underscore and which will be assigned with the query value. The iContains lookup is case insensitive, so it will match any client's names that contain the keyword regardless of case. To combine multiple conditions, you can use the queue object using bar. Now since I will also search by city field, I will use iContents for city field as well. Now we will write the return render statement and provide the request parameters as usual. Then, inside the quotation, we define a HTML page called search_client. Now we will pass the result array. And I will also pass the query variable along with it. Let's create the search_client.html page in the templates folder. To make our work easier, let's use some common code, which you all already know which code blocks we actually need. There's not much to explain about these, we covered these topics at the beginning of this tutorial series. We write a header for this page with the h1 tag here. Now we want to show what we type in the search box. So I'm writing search result for with an h tag inside a p tag. So I use a Django tag. And here I will print the query that I passed. Now we need to run a for loop and show the data list based on the search query. So we will run this loop inside the ul tag. I've already said that I'm not really focusing on design right now. So we'll do this loop on the results we pass in views file, which basically contains the filtered client list. We will show our client list inside the li tag. And in this case, I want to see the client's name and city. I am writing the sentence resident of to make it a little more meaningful. Then I am also showing the city value of that client. After the loop, intending should be maintained. Now we use another Django tag and write empty inside it. This is required if there is no data. So now I'm showing the no result found message here. Don't forget to close the loop. Now we have a small task left on our home page. The form tag we used for search here requires an action. Otherwise, how do we pass the user's search text to the search client function defined in the views file? So here inside the Django tag we need to give the action name defined in the URLs file. Here we gave search_client as the action name in the URLs file. So here we will give that action name. And the method will be get. Okay, save all files. Our search is complete for now. Now it's time to check. Reload the browser first. Now let's type something in the search box. And hit the search button. Oh, what happened? Yes, I figured out the problem. There seems to be a spelling problem with iContains as you see above. Let's fix it. You see, I made a spelling mistake here. This can happen sometimes. Okay, let's write the correct spelling. Save this file and check again. Just reload the browser. And here is the search result we can see. You see there are 3 records we found for the text tan. Let's check one more time. This time I am typing ROB, and then hit search. Now we get only one record for the text ROB. And here we see a client named Robin who is from Dhaka. Actually it's my nickname. Now let's search with the city name. In this case I am typing Dhaka. Now look, we have 2 client records. One client is named Robin and the other is named Tanvir Rahman. So we have also completed the search feature. Great. So that's it for today. So in the next tutorial we will export the client list as PDF and CSV file. So stay connected with me because more tutorials on machine learning, AI, deep learning, data analysis, and data engineering are coming very soon. Thank you for now, see you in our next tutorial. Welcome back everyone. So far we have covered almost all the features needed for a web application. Now the only thing left is to develop the export feature. Now we will see how to export a CSV file. So let's get started. So our plan is that we will export this client list as a CSV file. Although developing this feature is not very complex and you will understand it very easily. So let's go back to the code editor. Since the client list is shown on the home page, we should work from the home page first. Right? So let's first create a button. I copied the above code for my convenience. I name the button Export as CSV. So let's take a look and see if the button is showing properly. Reload the web browser. You see our export button is showing. Now we need to work on this button to export this client list as the CSV file. Okay. Let's go back to the code editor. So we will first define a URL action for this export button. So here I am writing export_CSV as the URL action name. So now let's go to the views file and define a function called export_CSV. And as usual, we pass the request parameter. So before we move forward, we need to import two packages. Let's import the packages we need. First we will import the CSV package. So, type import CSV. Now we are going to import HTTP response package. For this, type from Django.http then import HTTP response. This is actually Django built-in package library. Now let's go back to the export CSV function and start writing the functionality to export the CSV file. Now inside our export CSV function, let's define an object reference called response. This response will basically act as an object reference for the HTTP response. Now we need to define the content type inside the parentheses. So type content_type equals text/CSV. Here text/CSV must be written inside the quotation marks. Now we need to define the content disposition header in the response array. Here content disposition will basically request the browser to download a file. Now type $sign and inside the quotation marks write attachment then put a comma after that type filename equals clients.csv. If I explain it in a little more detail, it will become clearer to you. First, we created an HTTP response object with its content type set to text/CSV. Then, we set the content disposition header to attachment. Filename equals clients.csv. This tells the browser to download the file as an attachment with the specified file name. And finally, we use Python's built-in CSV module to write data to the response. We are now going to write the data to the CSV file. So I am maintaining a comment for this. Actually, maintaining comments is a good practice. So here I first define an object called writer and set the appropriate content type for the response and use csv.writer to write the data to the response. So write response inside the parentheses. Now we will define the header for the CSV file that we will export. In other words, we will define what column headers will be in the CSV file. So type writer.writeRow. And we define the table columns we want to export by defining an array inside parentheses. So let's see what columns we can consider from the model class. From here you can consider the full name, email address, phone number and city fields. Okay. So, first I'm taking full name. Then I take the email address. Next, let's consider the phone number field. And finally, consider the city field. You can also consider other fields if you want. Now we need to fetch the client data according to the fields we considered. So let's create an object reference called client_data, and we will get all the client data and assign it. Now we need to run a for loop on this client data because each client's data needs to be set in a row in the CSV file. So inside the for loop, let's set a row for each client and define the fields that need to be set with the data. So type writer.writeRow and then set the client fields inside the parentheses. It is important to note here that the fields that we considered above as the header of the CSV file must be aligned with the fields. Otherwise, the column header will not match the column data. So I will first take client.fullname and then take client.email and similarly take the rest of the fields. I hope you understand. Now take client.phone. And finally bring the city. So type client.city. Okay. Now we need a return statement, where we will return response. So type return response. Okay, we're almost done. But we have one more thing to do. That is, we need to define the export_CSV function as the action in the urls.py file. So let's define it. I copied this register path statement for my convenience and pasted on the very last line. Here you see that I have defined this export_CSV action function here in views file. And through the URLs file it will be called from the export as CSV button defined on the home page. So let's go to the URLs file and write the export_CSV action URL in the URLs file. You already know about this. Still, I explained it in case anyone has any confusion. So our work is done, now it's time to test. Here you see our exported CSV file is supposed to be downloaded as client.csv. So let's test now to see if everything is working according to our plan. Okay. Let's reload the browser first. Now click the Export as CSV button. Great. Here you see our CSV file has been downloaded as the client.csv file. Now, let's open this CSV file. Wow! We are seeing our client data here. Great, we were able to successfully export the CSV file. So that's it for today. So in the next tutorial we will export the client list as PDF. Stay connected with me because more real-life project tutorials on machine learning, AI, deep learning, data analysis, and data engineering are coming very soon. Thank you for now, see you in our next tutorial.